In some of the previous videos, we've seen that what the critical squares are, depending on where the pawn is situated. So we've seen that, for example, that on a bishop or a queen or a king pawn, it's relatively straightforward. We've seen that on a knight pawn, it's a little more complicated. Sometimes the superior side will have to reposition its king in such a manner that the inferior side should not be able to force a draw, a stalemate, by not being able to move anywhere legally. So so that's one of the things we've seen with a knight pawn. Here we're considering a rook pawn. A rook pawn is even harder for the superior side to win. As a matter of fact, with a rook pawn, the critical square for a rook pawn is not like we've seen on previous videos on the rank in front of the pawn or on 2 ranks in front of the pawn. The critical square is actually the 7th rank of the knight file. Okay, in our case, it's the G file. If it were to be an A pawn, then it would be on the B file. So black needs to be able to get to this square right here, G2. Okay, so it's always going to be either G2. For black, it's going to be G2 or B2. For white, it's going to be B7 or G7. That's the critical square for a rook pawn. If the superior side is not able to occupy that square, it's going to be a draw. Why? Simple. Because in this case, it's white's turn to act. Once white moves into G1, it's a draw, because the problem is that black cannot control the critical square, which is some square in the 7th rank, while protecting the pawn as it queens. Because since white occupies the corner, black cannot do anything. Because if white tries to, black cannot eject the white from the corner without causing a stalemate. If black were to move here, for example, then he will lose the pawn. Black moves into H3, and there's no legal move for white. So this is an extremely bad situation for black, and in this case, black cannot win. Of course, if it were black's turn to act right now, then black would be able to push the pawn and win. White would be forced onto the E file, and then black will be able to promote even without occupying the critical square, because white has nowhere else to go other than the E file. But since it's white's turn to act, once white is on either G or the G file or the H file, it's a draw. As a matter of fact, even being on the F file is enough, because white is preventing black from getting to G2, which is the critical square. So in this case, for example, if it was black's turn to act, and let's see, it was black's turn to act, and black moves into, H2, it's also a draw, because white is going to prevent black from getting out of the H file. So now, even though black has control of the queening square, but black cannot push the pawn into the queening square because the king is obstructing. So now they're going to shuffle back and forward. I mean, if black pushes the pawn, it's a draw, because then black has nowhere to. I mean, yeah, because then now black has nowhere to go. So if black just moves back, then it's going back and forth. It's a repetitive draw. So there's no way for black to win. So we see that it's very difficult for the superior side to win when it's a rook file. When it's a rook file pawn. So the critical square again is the 2nd or the 7th rank, and it's either the B or the G file. And if the king is not able to occupy that square, it's going to be a draw in most cases.